Cool. Welcome to the Officio Spotlight podcast. My name is Simon Lipscomb and thank you very much for listening. Today, really excited we get to meet with another procurement professional operating at the forefront of our profession. But today with a focus on a part of the world that we haven't actually had the chance to talk about too much up to this point, namely the Middle East. And my guest today is Sam Achampong. Sam has held numerous procurement roles across the UK and Middle East, and today is the MENA Regional Manager for the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, or CIPS as it's otherwise known. So Sam, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation today. We should start with perhaps the most important thing. I'm just looking here at the notes that have been provided to me by our producer Abby, and she says you're a huge Arsenal fan. So I just wondered what you thought the prospects were for Arsenal this season.
So hi, Simon, first of all, and thanks for the invitation, because I'm certainly not an Arsenal fan, but I guess you could have a correlation because I'm the opposite of an Arsenal fan, i.e. a proper football fan. So I'm a Spurs fan. So absolutely.
That's fine. Okay, so just for clarity, Spurs are...
Can I just say, it's been 16 years. It's been 16 years since Tottenham won a trophy. I have You can't expect me to stay silent. Sorry.
Well, there is a correlation because it's been 16 years since I moved to the Middle East. And an interesting fact is that when I was flying to Dubai, I was flying over on the day and actually on the exact time that Spurs were playing Chelsea in the League Cup final, now called the Carabao Cup. And by the time I landed, they had won. So I wonder whether me moving to the Middle East is a bit of a jinx. Haven't won anything since.
And to get the podcast back on track, Sam, so for the record, you're a Tottenham fan, not an Arsenal fan, so that's good to have that clarified. Actually, I mean, to your point about the story of the Carabao Cup, it's probably a great place to start, actually. So I'm assuming from the Tottenham thing and what I think is a slight tinge of a kind of North London accent there. So I think you're in Dubai at the moment, not originally from Dubai. So I'd love to understand how your journey in our profession started and how you've ended up in Dubai, where we're talking to you today.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I grew up in Tottenham, which is why I'm a Tottenham fan, because there's no other reason to be a Tottenham fan. I thought I'd just get that out of the way before Abby chucks it in there. So yeah, I grew up within visual distance of White Hart Lane, so that's my origins. My procurement career started off and carried on in the City of London. So my major roles were with land securities in central London, where I guess cut my procurement teeth. That's why I first joined the procurement department, had my first procurement experiences and was there for over 9 years. I moved on from there to an organisation called Buying Force, who are a procurement consultancy. So I was involved in a lot of the procurement and supply chain set up there, praising suppliers and putting together strategies. That's kind of my London experience, and that spans about, probably 13, 14 years. In 2008, I moved to Dubai. It wasn't necessarily a planned move. I went on holiday there and I fell in love with the place, more out of the blue sky thinking of the time, which prevails now, in that, look, we can and we will do anything. We won't let bureaucracy get in the way of us building or innovating, and that kind of struck a chord with me. So when I left Dubai, where I'd only gone there for a stopover, actually, I was kind of convinced that's somewhere where I wanted to work. And 4 months later, I moved to Dubai with an organisation, a company called Nikhil, who I guess are the Dubai equivalent of Land Securities.
Okay.
As a construction company, as a real estate company.
Sorry, Sam. I was just going to say, I'd love to understand a little bit about how you found the profession in Dubai or in the broader Middle East when you first arrived in the region in 2008.
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. And it's one I've been asked so many times that it's a very easy one to answer, because I remember the time itself. When I moved, I kind of equated the maturity of procurement in Middle East or Dubai at the time. The region is so diverse, you can't really characterize any particular city as being representative. But yeah, I said procurement maturity-wise, it's probably 20 years behind, let's say, the UK, that assertion at the time. So had a lot to do in terms of how it could grow. And I guess the way to kind of put that into perspective is I joined one of the largest retail groups in the region to set up the procurement team. And that was in 2015. So if you put that into perspective, you'll never get that challenge or opportunity in the UK, for example, because the largest retail group would already have a procurement team, didn't really have a procurement function to talk of. So that was a maturity gap in terms of recognizing procurement as a function and recognizing procurement professionals as professionals.
Excellent. And Sam, sorry, I interrupted you. So you went to the region, joined as you said, the equivalent of Land Securities for our UK listeners. You obviously now have a really important role within CIPS. I'd love to understand a little bit how the journey towards that role in CIPS happened.
Yeah, I guess it's important to note that throughout my career, throughout my procurement career, I've always been a very active CIPS member, with the branches and the volunteer communities. When I moved to the Middle East, I continued to be active in the procurement community. I chaired the CIPS Fellows Committee in the Middle East for a period of time. So I was very, very close to the professional body and the individuals within it. In 2015, I was asked if I'd be interested in managing CIPS in the Middle East. Of course, I said no initially. And I guess because, like a lot of people, a lot of professionals, CIPS is very different on the inside than it is from the outside. Because I guess everyone has a view of what CIPS is to them and based on their interaction. So to some people, it's a membership body. Some people, it's all about examinations. Some people are aware of some of the kind of B2B kind of transformation interactions we do with organizations. But very few people know the entirety of what CIPS does. So I guess I had the view that I'm a proper procurement professional. Why would I join an institute? That sort of thing. But I'm glad I made the choice to take the challenge, because to me that's what it was. It was a case of saying, well, yeah, why not? I've got enough views of the institute, and now someone is saying, well, if you've got so many views, why don't you put them into practice? So my conclusion was, yeah, of course I will. I mean, how hard can it be? So I'll do it. A couple of years, say what's what, and come out. But but I think what probably characterizes the reason I've been here for the period of time I've been with CIPS, which is just looking at the year, probably coming up to about 9 years now. I think what probably characterizes that is, I mean, I came to the region because I could see that I could really add value. Because in terms of maturity, I worked with maybe 4 organizations in roles to set up procurement teams, transform function, etc. And I guess with CIPS, the opportunity it's afforded me is to work with a lot more organizations on exactly the same thing. That's what really makes the role so interesting.
And Sam, if listeners of this podcast would be quite global in terms of the audience, I think Saudi Arabia particularly seems to be an area that's, a region that's undergoing enormous transformation and change. Just for people that may not be familiar with the region, could you just, not even necessarily at a procurement level, just kind of talk through the kind of changes that are happening in Saudi Arabia, what you've seen, and other parts of the region as well, obviously.
Saudi's huge, and it really takes a conversation, a real deep conversation, to try and illustrate how big what they're doing is, because it is quite remarkable. But I mean, as I said, I came to the region in 2008, and at the time it was all about Dubai was on the cusp building a lot of the things they're doing. Also, Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Obviously, at the time, they built the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa. The Abu Dhabi Formula One was built, so that became the first kind of big sports event. The region, now there are several. Now I think there's probably 4 Formula Ones in the region, from Saudi to Doha to Bahrain. So Formula One was built, and then you had several other things. Emirates Airline was doing well, and you had the biggest mall in the world, the Dubai Mall, and subsequently the World Expo was held in Dubai. So over that period of time, there's a lot of activity going on, which was very ambitious. All that activity was designed to diversify the economy of the UAE away from an over-reliance on oil. So that's really what that transformation is. So that's, 2008, 16 years ago or whatever. Let's fast forward to where we are now. And since 2016, 2017, Saudi have been putting together something similar, which is a huge diversification program called Saudi Vision 2030. So that's looking to do the same thing. Saudi had a huge reliance on oil. The idea of Vision 2030 is to build, industries and initiatives to diversify their revenue streams, to make it more balanced away from an over-reliance on oil. So I think if you look at Vision 2030, and look, it's a huge initiative, and we can't really cover it all in this conversation, but if you wanted to just broadly illustrate it, I think there's 11 pillars in Vision 2030 around building new industries, whether it's healthcare or construction or around, well, one of them's called giga projects, but there's other ones around building schools and also building tourist infrastructure, or building a tourist industry, which includes building theme parks and things along those lines. So these are all different pillars involved in Vision 2030. And it's very comprehensive. But to give you an idea, I think one of the pillars is termed giga projects. Giga projects is probably anything around a value of over something like $500 million, something along those lines. And I think there's something like 32 of those kind of projects underway at the moment, which shows the scale and ambition of what's going on. And that's just one of the pillars of Vision 2030. And I think another gauge of that scale is probably 3 of those projects in overall size are the size of Belgium. So you're building whole cities, whole countries as part of this project. So what's going on there actually does, to a certain extent, dwarf what happened a decade and a bit before in other parts of the region. It's certainly very, very ambitious, but I guess Saudi is the biggest economy in the region. But collectively, all these initiatives, whether it's Saudi or the UAE vision, or what's happening in Oman as far as logistics, or what's happening in Qatar, collectively are bringing that focus to the region. And it's no accident that you've had the last 2, COP27, COP28, have all been in the region. The World Expo was in Dubai and soon be in Saudi. And of course, more importantly, the World Cup was in the region in Qatar, which is a real gauge of progress. That was in Qatar, and that obviously was, at the time it was announced, being in the UK was out of the realms of belief for anyone. So the ambitions are certainly here, and procurement is playing a big part because we work very closely as CIPS with, for example, the Expo 2020 project.
Yeah.
And they had huge ambitions before the project was before it even broke ground, to talk about how they wanted to make sure that it's an exemplar as far as procurement, supply chain practice and best practice overall is concerned.
And Sam, given just the scale of some of those, I mean, you mentioned there's 3, for example, the size of Belt. Look, what does that mean for procurement? I mean, presumably that's impacting global supply chains, like availability of certain goods. Yeah, I'm really intrigued to know, as a procurement professional in the region, what the impact of that must be challenging, right?
There's the impact and the challenge. So the first thing is the challenge, because rather than having the usual procurement challenges of, we need to build or construct this building, or we need to put together, service level agreements to maintain this area, or we need to get decent marketing initiative underway. The procurement challenges are, we need to build a city. We need to make sure it's functional. We need to make sure it has sustainability credentials, and we need it to happen within a very short period of time. So the procurement challenges are vast. But you're right, all of these initiatives going on at the same time, the obvious challenge is going to be, well, there's a finite number of suppliers.
Yeah.
And if you think of the scale of some of these projects, if you think about things like NEOM or Ula, which are all the Red Sea projects, which are huge, obviously you're going to have constraint as far as suppliers are concerned, because there are only certain suppliers who can engage to construct at that scale. So to a certain extent, yes, it works both ways. Those suppliers are ramping up and taking a real interest in serving the projects and the requirements in Saudi Arabia. But yes, I think that the challenge of having or being able to source suppliers or supplies will continue to be a challenge, and will become more and more of a challenge as we go forward. So it creates a market where the supplier has the advantage. We're going to talk in straight procurement here. Suppliers will begin to have a distinct advantage because they are sought after, and each project is trying to happen on a scale or speed that is, I guess, unprecedented. But saying that, there are some mitigations. There's a strong localization drive in Saudi. They have a local content authority, which is all designed about encouraging and building and empowering both local sourcing and the development of local talent and local suppliers. So that's going to be a mitigation against an over-reliance on external suppliers in any case. And in fact, I was speaking to a large software vendor recently, which is totally born out of Saudi Arabia, developed in Saudi Arabia. They're a local organization that was born out of Saudi.
And Sam, again, thinking of our profession, and I guess probably in your role at CIPS, is there, I presume, a market with that level of growth and that level of ambition, the kind of inherent procurement capability, I guess, wasn't necessarily there in the scale or the numbers that the region needs. But to your point, there's a real localization to this. Love to get your perspective on that idea of creating procurement capability within the region, how you're seeing organizations do that, what part CIPS are playing, etc.
Yeah, look, it's a huge challenge because if the maturity of procurement as a function is quite low in the first place, it takes a monumental effort to build that, because even if you go through a capability development program, around skills, around practical interventions, or around certifications and qualifications is only ever going to get you so far. If you equate it to, martial arts or karate, somebody gets a black belt doesn't mean they can beat Bruce Lee. It means they now have all the skills relevant to now do their job. But at that point, they have all the relevant knowledge and skills to do their job. And now they need to get the experience. So that's really the conundrum. I mean, as far as CIPS is concerned, we're working with a myriad of organizations and have done for many, many years to build strong capability programs, strong capabilities using traditional and non-traditional routes. We use a lot of what we call applied learning methodology, which is more kind of project-based or on-the-job based training rather than academic training, to speed up the understanding of procurement as a profession rather than as a kind of transactional concepts. We're working and have worked with a lot of the big players, from Public Investment Fund to ADNOC, Saudi Arabia, to the airlines, to Qatar Foundation in Qatar, and Petroleum Development Oman. So we work across the region with a lot of the big players who have strong ambitions to build up their teams. And that is really closing the maturity gap. So you've got a lot of more skilled and experienced procurement professionals than you had maybe 10 years ago, and who are now beginning to break through and make a real impact. But, interestingly enough, where we are now in 2024, I think the time period it takes to have skilled procurement professionals can be leapfrogged, because of course we have technology now, and technology plays a huge part in cutting out the more transactional part of procurement. So there are a lot of transactional elements of procurement that can be kind of handed over to technology, repetitive, low entry level tasks, RFIs, issuing, interrogating responses, or finding suppliers, issuing things to suppliers, or understanding, doing supply research. So what that means is that you can really accelerate the capability gap very, very quickly, so that these professionals are learning the more strategic side of procurement very, very early on, or earlier on than they would do in the past. So that definitely does play in the favor of a region that initially had a capability gap.
Yeah. And Sam, I'm guessing there will still be people from all over the world, I guess, approached about roles, opportunities in the region. I guess, like everything, people have their assumptions. How would you find it if someone was listening, been offered a role in Saudi or the Middle East generally? What would your advice be?
I would say to any procurement professional that's coming out here, you're not coming here just to turn the wheel and to get into a traditional procurement function and do the usual things that you may do. You're really, the reason you're being brought here is to really come up with some quite complex solutions to some mega problems. And it really does add value to your day. It still does to mine, and I still look around the region and think about some of the things that are going on and some of the challenges that are being given to procurement professionals, which I think are probably unique in this region in terms of the myriad of exciting challenges you're going to have. And if we talk about what the key things or the key topics in procurement are at the moment, or in business in general, we're going to land on talking about ESG, of course. And in this region, that provides a unique challenge, because there are some real, sustainable ESG solutions being thought about, implemented and enacted in the region. But you've got to remember that by definition, this has to be the most unsustainable region in the world.
Yes.
So you've got to think that these solutions are doubly hard to put in place. So when you get a kind of LEED certified building, you've got to think about the challenges that those, the people in charge had to go through to make that building so sustainable, because the generic nature of the region is there's very little access to natural sources of water. So anything that happens is going to be draining on the Earth's resources. So there's some really intricate solutions that have to be put in place, and that really makes procurement interesting on a day-to-day basis.
And it was actually one of the things I was fascinated to get your perspective on, Sam. As you say, to some extent, the region is by definition unsustainable. I guess it's also one where, frankly, the funding for these enormous projects is driven from oil reserves in other places. The topic of ESG, is it one that you find organisations in the region really embracing, or is it one that feel that they need to talk about, but the actual action isn't there?
I think out here, a lot of the thinking is, interestingly enough, led by the leadership. So, and the ESG subject does come from the very, very top. And I think, as I said, it probably is no accident that the last two COPs have happened in this region, because there's a real appetite to take leadership, it seems, on these subjects. And only today, interestingly enough, I saw there were announcements that the negotiators in the last COP28 summit, the lead negotiators, have just been awarded, I think, their presidential awards of recognition for their part in the negotiations of some of the resolutions that came out of the last COP. So, ESG and sustainability are real critical topics out here, and they take it very, very seriously, and they have real ambitions to build sustainable futures. We have, I think, this Masdar city in Abu Dhabi, which was built as a sustainable city. NEOM in Saudi Arabia is supposed to be built as a zero carbon city. So definitely the intention is there, and that does filter through the entire thinking of most organisations out here.
Sam, we should probably draw the conversation to conclusion. I want to say thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It's really fascinating, particularly, as we said at the start, to get a perspective on a part of the region that to this point, unfortunately, we haven't had as much time to talk about, but we'd love to talk about more. I suppose my last question I should ask you, the next North London derby, Tottenham Arsenal predictions, because we can always come back and see if you're right.
Well, I'll tell you what the impact of the outcome will be before I tell you the prediction. What will happen is that Arsenal will be probably clearly on course to win the league, and the result of that North London derby will mean they won't win the league.
That is not nice.
Cue Abigail.
That is really mean.
I love it.
The score really is immaterial. If all it needs to knock you off course is a draw, then get a draw.
Sam, I also have a big thank you because in the best part of more than 3 years, Abby and I have been doing this podcast. I've never been able to trigger her to actually say anything until we take the mickey out of Arsenal. So I also thank you very much on that front.
It's my pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Right, thanks again, Sam. Fascinating conversation. Speak soon.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Speak soon. All the best.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give us a click on the follow button on your chosen podcast platform. We'd also love to hear your views on either future topics or indeed if you've got any thoughts on future guests that we should look to get onto the podcast. Thanks again. See you next time.